Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. If I can invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of O Canada, and we will be this evening's choir. Thank you, everyone. You may notice that one of our council seats is empty today, and that's because Councillor Galloway Seelock last week gave birth to her third son. And so on behalf of council, I'd like to congratulate Kelly and Trevor and their family, and we look forward to having Kelly and our junior councillor join us for future meetings in the weeks and months ahead. Councillor Singh?
Pecuniary interest.
Oh, okay. I'll get to you in a second. It's been moved by Councillor Yonetsky that the minutes of the regular meeting held September 26th and the special meetings held September 26th, October 3rd and 4th as mailed to the mayor and councillors be accepted. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, it's just related to the caucus item. My family or parents own real estate close to the subject matter, so I had declared a conflict of interest.
Okay, and this is for the caucus session preceding this session. And Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I have to declare the same conflict. Not the same, I don't know. I'm not clear why I have to declare a conflict, but some advice is to be on the safe side, is to declare a conflict because I don't know.
Because you have a family member employed by one of the parties involved.
I have a family member employed by one of the parties, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those have been duly noted. And communication to file, there is one piece of communication that has been referred to file. Unless otherwise directed, I shall refer the communications as listed on the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll now move into the presentations, and Mr. Chapman will do a presentation and an update on the Kitchener-Waterloo Joint Service Initiative. Welcome, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic, members of council. I'm pleased to be here tonight on behalf of the corporate leadership team to present an update for you on the activities of the Joint Services Initiative over the past year and also talk about what lies ahead for the initiative over the coming year. I have about 13 slides in the presentation. It should take about 6 minutes to walk through them, and then we'd be pleased to take any questions or comments that you have. I'd also note that Waterloo City Council is receiving a similar presentation from their staff this evening. As you know, Kitchener and Waterloo, being twin cities, have a very successful track record of partnership. We have similar dynamics and a contiguous urban area which positions us in a unique way to work closely together. For the past 10 years, we've had a formalized joint services initiative, and we've completed over 65 initiatives together under that program, many of which are still ongoing. To give you some examples of past work, it includes things like border street maintenance, after hours and fire dispatch, the Woodworking and Crafts Center, and two-way radio technology. The benefit to the public is clear: greater efficiency and improved customer service. In 2006, Council approved a terms of reference for the committee, and we follow an annual cycle in accordance with that terms of reference. In order to identify projects, the management teams in each municipality brainstorm ideas, and those can come from one of two places, either within the very core services of our departments and also from the Council-approved business plan that lays out special projects and initiatives for the year. Those opportunities are scoped out in detail, and then a short list of the most feasible ones is finalized in a joint meeting between the two management teams of Kitchener and Waterloo. And I'll just highlight 4 projects that were successes in 2015-2016. The first is the reprofiling and reconstruction of Forsyth Drive and Aberdeen Road in Ward 8, which is a project being led by our engineering division. This project will address substantial drainage issues when construction is completed in 2017. And the photo on the right illustrates some of the problems that are being experienced in the neighborhood. And in case you can't tell from the color in the photo, that backyard in that picture is completely covered in water, which is flowing through the rear yard. Working with Waterloo on this project ensures that we have a comprehensive solution to a problem that affects both cities, that we realize cost savings, and also impose less disruption on the neighborhood as construction proceeds. The city submitted an application for FCM funding with Waterloo, as well as London and Kingston, to research district thermal energy systems. We're very interested in the potential for these projects in our community, particularly in intensive redevelopment areas such as the Innovation District. And so we're excited about the partnership that this represents for these 4 communities. Community services staff worked in partnership with Waterloo and other local municipalities to negotiate a group purchase for recreation software. This is the software which enables online registration and payment for our course offerings. The approach was efficient, and it ensured that we had greater purchasing power going together than had we gone individually. And the last example of our ongoing work is the water and sewer rate design study, which Kitchener Utilities led in partnership with the City of Waterloo. Doing this work together yielded efficiencies and economies of scale. Waterloo has approved their plan, and as you know, we're in the process of working through that plan together. So these are 4 examples of projects that were completed or are underway from the past year. But we're also excited about the 5 projects that have been selected as priorities for the coming year, and we'd like to speak to those very briefly tonight. As you know, the city has a 24/7 corporate contact center, which currently provides some after-hours support to the City of Waterloo. Our first initiative this year is to look at expanding the after-hours support we provide to Waterloo, and their bylaw enforcement calls after hours are a likely candidate for that process. For Waterloo, this represents an efficiency and a customer service improvement, and for Kitchener, it represents a revenue-generating opportunity. The second opportunity we're pursuing relates to external grants and the coordination of those grants. The city is inundated with grant opportunities, and often they have short timelines and very complex accountability requirements. And so we see the potential that sharing resources could create efficiencies and also allow us to potentially access even more grant funding. Third, Kitchener and Waterloo plan to further integrate their lobbying efforts around two-way all-day GO train service from Toronto to Kitchener. Efforts to date have clearly attracted the province's attention, but also underscore the importance of maintaining and increasing a coordinated effort between the two municipalities. Fourth, the cities will be exploring the opportunity to move from the current provincial offences court system in favor of a system of administrative penalties. The current court system is cumbersome, expensive, time-consuming, and often leads to lengthy delays for citizens. As courts cut back on trial time for parking infractions, the situation will only worsen. Exploring this change together is efficient, and there may also be opportunities if we choose, or if Council chooses to implement it, to retain together the independent hearing officers that are required to make the system work. Lastly, greater attention is being paid to the issue of mental health in the workplace, because this is the right thing to do, but also because there's new law that requires us to pay closer attention to this issue. We have an opportunity to work together with Waterloo on joint staff training and awareness building, in part because we both employ the same employee family assistance provider. This means that we can implement similar programming within our organizations and avoid duplicating efforts. So those are the 5 priorities of the committee for the coming year. As mentioned at the outset, there are reasons why Kitchener and Waterloo are uniquely positioned to work together. That said, there are opportunities that arise from time to time for collaboration with and across the region. Two recent examples of local regional initiatives are the LED street lighting conversion project, which has just gone to tender, as well as the Engage platform, which is attracting considerable interest across the community and across the region. We believe this is a good news story, and so between website content, press releases, the annual report, and joint services branding, we're trying to get the word out about our Twin City cooperative relationship and the benefits that it provides to both communities. With that, I and my colleagues would be pleased to respond to any of your questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, Dan, and certainly exciting to see the level of issues that we're collaborating on, as well as what's in store for the coming year. We have several questions for you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. Thanks, Dan, for your presentation. I agree, this is all good news, and it's great for our taxpayers. One of the questions that I have, though, is in one of the slides, we had 65 initiatives that we are currently coordinating together. Do you have like an estimate of what other services besides the ones that you had mentioned here for next year? Like, do we have a sense of that?
In terms of the list of services?
Yes.
Or
like, could it open up to like 100 initiatives, or could it open up to 90 initiatives? I just want to know what kind of sense of initiatives that we could expand on.
I think there's a lot of potential. I wouldn't put out a number except to say that in setting a list of 5 for this year, I think we were choosing from a list of perhaps 20 or 25 potential candidates. So I think we see the potential for this initiative to continue to grow on the pace that it's been on for the past 10 years.
Okay, that's good. I'd like to hear that. The more initiatives, the better. And the other question I have, I'm going to probably put you on the spot a little bit, but is there a way to quantify the dollar cost savings by this joint collaboration?
I don't know that we've set out to do that, but that could be something that we start to do, and so it may be for the 5 initiatives that we have in front of us this year. As we report back in future years, we can attempt to quantify the efficiency or the savings that we've achieved.
Okay, yeah, I would think that would be a great idea. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Ioannidis asked some of the key questions I wanted to, and encourage kind of the similar practice, starting to monetize exactly what those savings would be, simply because as we move forward, there could be an opportunity to re-engage in a conversation of amalgamation, and I think it's really the data that we would derive from this sort of thing that could help to make that case of seeing if it's worthwhile or not. The other question I had is joining with City of Waterloo for grant funding. We're competing at the same time. So can you kind of elaborate on it a little bit, how that is beneficial?
I think our view is for the programs that we've talked about, we're relatively small fish in a very big pond, and so I think that the risk that we would steal funding from each other is fairly slim. I think the benefit of putting more resourcing behind it would outweigh the risk of losing funding opportunities.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. It was very enlightening. I didn't realize that, the level of cooperation that does take place, so it's impressive. Thank you.
I think just on that last question, Councillor Singh, the example that was there of the partnership with London and Kingston. I mean, when you go for things like the Green Municipal Fund funding, partnerships and collaborations actually help score points for you. So by doing it together, sometimes we actually have a better chance of getting it.
Great.
Councillor Fernandez, you're next.
Thank you. Mr. Chapman, I have sort of 2 questions, maybe the one I'm asking may be a bit too detailed at this point in time. You're talking about the shared bylaw administration fines and adjudication. Am I to understand that what may occur is that our bylaw would, and Waterloo's bylaw would be issuing tickets, and then it would go to a new entity instead of through the regular court system? Is that what you're hoping to happen?
Right. So as I mentioned, the courts are cutting back on trial time for things like parking infractions, which I have the sense they see as a nuisance and detracts from more important trial time. So Oshawa, Vaughan, Brampton, Burlington, Mississauga, Markham, Oakville have all implemented this system already. And essentially what it would mean is that council would appoint both a screening officer and a hearing officer. They would be independent of the administration, and they would serve that adjudication function. And so it's a better customer service for citizens because it's faster. It's less costly, easier to schedule. So yes, it would replace the current court regime.
Okay, so, but then we would, ourselves, if we're hiring those two people, would that be, the cost of hiring those people would be offset by the parking tickets and revenue that we'd be getting from that?
So the experience of other municipalities have been that they actually recover more of the ticket amounts that they're issuing, and so the write-offs are smaller than they were under the old system. And we also presently have staff in legal that prosecute and spend time in court. And again, with an inefficient process in the courts, we could do better to have it streamlined through these hearing officers.
I'm sure that, although the public may not want to hear that their tickets will get processed faster, it would be good to know that those decisions can be made quicker, and it will. They won't be spending as much time sitting and waiting for a court, and neither will we be expending staff time for court cases to happen, right?
That's correct. And I have to assume that for most people, it's very intimidating to go to the Provincial Offences Court to argue a parking ticket. And so certainly this would be, I believe, a much more customer-friendly approach than forcing a person to go to court to argue what is a fairly low-value ticket.
Mm-hmm. Do we have a way of letting the public know about how often we collaborate with our Twin City? Because I think that's really... those are the kind of efficiencies and the kind of things that citizens are asking about all the time. You know, why is the snowplow stopping right at the boundary line between Kitchener and Waterloo? Which, in actuality, it doesn't really. We do some cross-servicing with snowplowing as a basic example, right?
Right, so I'll answer it on two levels. The first, actually, the brand that you see in front of us is a brand that is publicized on Joint Services Initiatives. And I recently saw, I believe it was a letter around leaf collection, where this brand was attached to it. So in the letter that was going out to the homeowner, it referenced the brand. So it happens at that level. I think where we see a need is to ramp up the broad communication about the whole program through city publications and that sort of thing. So I think that's where our focus will be over the next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's really important. And I think that will give citizens a more positive feeling that we're not just standing alone, that we do work together with our neighbors, and which is something we always ask our citizens to do as well. So thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the bylaw, but I understand it now, and I think it would work well and would work to the benefit of everyone, not only the people that have to come to the court, but also our administration of it. So, the other thing, I wanted to make a short comment that the cities have come a long way since 2006, and it's a much more formalized thing. But this working together has been going on for the last 30, 35 years. Not in a similar such a formal way, but it has gone on for a long time. So, and it's getting better and better every day. One of the things that back in the day that we had discussed in meeting together with not only the other two major urban municipalities, but also the region, was the idea of providing some centralized services to each of our communities. An example would be IT services. If there could be one central organization that could provide the services to each of the municipalities would still retain their autonomy, but they would buy whatever amount of service they wanted, or different kinds of services. But in working together, there could be savings and efficiencies. Has there been any further thought at looking at areas like that?
Through the mayor, yes, and I would say it's happening on two levels. So there have been a few very big success stories like the insurance pool, which you're very familiar with and brought in all of the municipalities. I think the greater potential in the future will not necessarily be on that scale, but will be on things like applications. So just as we've done in going to market for a customer relationship management system, we're leveraging the region's contract for the same piece of software, and we believe, and Janet can correct me if I'm wrong, but other municipalities are looking at doing the same thing. So rather than trying to integrate all of IT, there are situations like that where it makes sense. I think the other issue where we have a lot of anticipation is in relationships between municipalities like us and Waterloo. So they're already leveraging our corporate contact center after hours, and so we see potential to grow it. As you know, we provide fire dispatch service to Waterloo and some or all of the townships. And so those are the kinds of things that will grow. So I think it will be organic, service by service, or between municipalities, not necessarily all municipalities all at once.
Good. I'd like to see more of it. And as I say, we're able to each keep our own autonomy without the big A amalgamation, and we provide different services, different service levels for our constituents. It works well.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. No further questions, so Councillor Davey, you have a comment?
Yes, I see it's for information, so I suppose it does not need to be moved, but I just wanted to comment a little bit because the word amalgamation has been thrown around a bit, and I'm happy to see this before us because I'm not sure what it was in previous years exactly, but I recall about 4 or 5 years ago, the number of joint initiatives that we had at the City of Waterloo was in the 30s as opposed to 65, so I see that as a trend that's growing. Just wanted to remind that folks out there, because there was a lot of interest in the City of Kitchener with amalgamation. We had the referendum back in 2010, and roughly two-thirds of the City of Kitchener was interested in exploring the possibility of amalgamation, while the City of Waterloo was the opposite, only one-third. But I think it's the note's important here. I think the reason people were interested in it is because they wanted to see the efficiencies that we could possibly become being one city. Just because that ultimately failed doesn't mean that we can't work together behind the scenes and in situations like this where both residents benefit. So I'm happy to see it growing, and I expect more in the future.
Okay, looks like those are the end of the comments, and I would echo the comments that both you and Councillor Gazzola and others have made. I think it's tremendous how much we've been able to achieve and do together over the last number of years. It's an increasing trajectory, and what's becoming even more and more encouraging is not only looking at things between Kitchener and Waterloo, but as well as the other municipalities and the region. And I think that will continue to grow organically. I mean, we're even doing it, as we all know, with the new Economic Development Corporation and the work that we're doing on that front with it, and the collaboration between the region and all 7 municipalities on that front, which is encouraging. So I really want to thank staff for their efforts and their leadership on this. Thank you. We'll now move into delegations, and I'd like to remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentations. And the first delegation we have is Andy Hook to speak about taxes, particularly in relation to his neighborhood. Welcome back, Andy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time that you give me to talk, so I better get going because I got a lot to get through. My concern as a taxpayer the last little while is that it seems that the taxpayers flipping extra bills that don't have to be flipped. I'll give you a prime example on the area where I live. 2 years ago, the street was ripped up, the services were ripped up. You have given permission to 2 semis to be built, rather than put additional drainage in originally when the road was done. It had to be ripped up last week at an extra cost, and I'm sure that the cost is going to go to the taxpayers and not to the home builder. But I will give you another example of a job that's been done 3 times by the city's contractor, I should say. I'm always amazed when the city has rules for themselves and when the city has rules for the independent person in the city, either a resident or a landlord. Prime example being KCI lot. You went and you took down tennis courts at the lot. You had it all repaved. When I phoned the one time in a discussion to see who was responsible for the BOMAG, if people don't know what a BOMAG is, that's your compactor that compacts your roads and your parking lots and everything else. I was told it was the school board. I phoned the school board, and they said, no, it's the city. Now, in a case of any private individual or a group of people building anything in this city, you're required to put underground piping in, and you're not allowed to surface drain most lots. 3 times the stones coming down onto Glasgow Street have gone right down to Park Street, which causes undue danger to bicycle riders, car riders, pedestrians. 3 times that's happened. And I would say again, the next torrential rainfall we have, it's going to happen again. The other thing is that was very curious to me. We have a 38-unit apartment building being built right beside King Edward School. And when the road was ripped up 2 years ago, it hadn't even come to council yet for approval in the planning department. And yet they already made a special deal with the person who was doing the contract on the drainage to put in a larger line. Now, I understand that was paid by them, which is good. But my sense is, why could that have not been done for the semis? It costs way less to put in a extra line for 2 homes. You took 2 established residences, knocked them down, gave them permission to knock them down. You put in 2 drain lines with 2 water feeds, and yet you knew there was going to be 4 units there. So, like I said, they dig up the road, and it gets passed on to the taxpayers. I just don't understand it. I really don't. Basically, there's some other things too. I see your initiatives, and they're great, but from the taxpayer, I think the taxpayer this year would appreciate more that you would go to the police department and say to the police department and say to Chief Larkin, why can't we have more patrols downtown to direct traffic? This city was a nightmare for people driving in this city the last year. And through no help from the city, I might add, I think it was more or less a thing, well, you make out as best you can. We're not getting involved in this. Now, I realize the region has the goods on the light rail transit, but you have to stand up for us too. And one of the examples I don't hear in this initiative is we've got a police department that has got wages way out of whack. We have a fire department that's got wages way out of whack. And I don't hear anything from all you members about going down to Queen's Park and have it out and go down and talk to Miss Wynne and say, look, this is not sustainable. And from the taxpayers, that's more important than initiatives with Waterloo. I think it's about time that you take 2 steps back, read the newspaper a little bit more, all of you, and get in tune with what's happening in this world. Because you can't keep on spending, people. The well's dry. You got people out there right now that can't even afford to feed themselves, let alone put heat in their houses, and you raise the gas price another 10%, okay? And you raise that runoff water from homes. Craziness. Absolutely insane. I got 4 seconds left. Good luck. I'm never coming here again, so that's to the benefit of you. But I'm playing Santa Claus this year, and none of you are getting anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hook. Councillor Davey, you have a question of Mr. Hook?
Well, just a comment, actually. That's fine, Mr. Hook. Thanks for coming in and voicing your concerns. And I guess just very briefly, you asked a lot of questions. You had a lot of points. I don't have the answers to all of them, but I just wanted to make the one very clear point that if a road is ripped up for a private home to be serviced, the entirety of that cost is borne by the private sector individual that's doing that property. The City of Kitchener does not pay to tear up the street and service a private lot. So that cost would have been borne entirely. In terms of the well being dry, I think I don't know, when I hear this a lot, and we're about to get into budget, and it's something that I don't think Kitchener does a particularly great job of communicating, and that is, I want to say 2 brief things. Number one, our water and sewer costs, we've looked at it 1,000,000 times, and gas, the cost is what the cost is. We have to run it as efficiently as we can, but we have to make sure that we maintain those properly. Outside of that, we have our general tax levy increase, and year after year, Kitchener's tax levy increase has been lower than our surrounding municipalities because we fight very hard to make sure those tax increases are the minimum amount that we can keep them at. And I expect that to continue again this year's budget. So I'd be happy to have an offline conversation with you and looking at the region's taxation, Waterloo's taxation, Cambridge's taxation, Guelph's taxation versus the City of Kitchener. And I think once you see those in context, you'll be quite surprised.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
I just wanted to comment to you, Mr. Hook, that I really appreciate when residents come in and voice their concerns. I wish there were more people that came out at our public meeting in January to talk about their concerns before we set our budget, because it's very difficult to hear what people are thinking and that are talking about around their dining room table or in Tim Hortons if they don't come out and tell us. And we set aside a whole evening, an opportunity for people to come and say exactly what you said to us tonight. So if there's one message you can give to your acquaintances and your friends and your family, is come on the public night to discuss the budget, because I think it's really critical for us here at council. And believe me, I read the newspaper from top to bottom. So, and I think many of us around the Horseshoe do. We also have to remember the newspaper is in the business of selling newspapers. So I always say 50% of what they're writing is true, and 50% of it may be something that they want us to read. So encourage your friends and family to come out. Public night is, and I want to say that, thank you, the 16th of January. We want to hear what you have to tell us and what your concerns are and where you want to see us either reduce services so that we don't increase your tax rate, or what tax rates you want to see are acceptable. If we don't hear from you, then we don't know. So I appreciate you coming in, because I've made some notes, and you know, there'll be discussion about the issues you've raised.
Thank you.
Councillor Netsky.
Yes, thank you. And just as follow-up to Councillor Fernandez's comments about coming to the meeting, I do acknowledge, as she pointed out, there's one or maybe two residents at most that show up to offer their opinions. However, there are a number of other people in the gallery who are asking for money, whether they're agencies, different groups, sporting groups, or whatever, always asking for taxpayer money to make sure that they function. So they are here asking for money, but there's no residents, or very few, that do show up for expressing their concerns about keeping the budget down. I just want to add another comment. Maybe the mayor may also comment on that as well. You're concerned about the wages of the fire department and the police department. We have struggled with this around council as well over the past several years. I am quite concerned, as well as most other council members, that some of the rates are higher than increases that other staff get, and that is as a result of the negotiation process that takes place between the city and the fire union people. And with them, the negotiations come to a stalemate. They go to arbitration. They make their pitch based on other municipalities, and they usually get what other municipalities get, which is higher than what we get, that we had offered in the first place. And then, of course, that wasn't in the budgeted, and then it becomes an issue. And usually the same scenario unfolds for the police department as well. So our hands are tied because the arbitration process is a provincial matter, and the province is not doing much anything about it. So I'm just throwing that out there from my perspective.
And I, too, will thank you, Mr. Hook, for coming in this evening. Just on that last item in particular, I can tell you that all of the mayors through LUMCO, the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, as well as the regional chairs, have been advocating with the Premier, the Minister of Labour, and so on, around interest arbitration, which is what results in the police and fire salaries that you're talking about. All three political parties have not demonstrated an interest in pursuing this issue, and so that's what we're up against. And but I wanted to assure you that it is something that we've advocated for. It's been written about from time to time by the local media. And it's something that I'd urge you to take up with our provincial counterparts.
I only have one thing to say. I know I'm not at the microphone. My grandfather was a policeman in the city of Kitchener from 1934 to 1939, and I wish I had his pay stubs, the stubs to show you.
They were a little different.
Yeah, way different.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for coming in. We'll move on to our next delegation then, and the next three delegations are with respect to Heritage Kitchener, item number 1. And the first delegation is James Howe. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, City Council, I'm very pleased to be here before you tonight. I strongly support the staff recommendation that Heritage Kitchener has passed to pursue designation of 48 Ontario Street North as a heritage property. I am involved, but before I get too much into that, just a little context for you. I am involved as an organizer of an informal group known as the Friends of 48 Ontario Street North, and although I'm here speaking as an individual, I just wanted to let you know that we did organize, with the cooperation and assistance of city staff, the building to be indoors open Waterloo region in September. There is strong public interest in the building. There were 344 people that attended. We had 17 volunteers who were there for one or more shifts. Another 42 people signed up to stay in touch with developments related to the building. And so sort of a ragtag band of friends of the building is now up to approximately 60. The general reaction of people who came to visit the building was that they could see huge potential in it. They felt that it was, but they were very surprised to learn that it has been owned by the City of Kitchener for 15 years and that it has been empty for 15 years. I can only imagine what they would think if they also knew that it had the potential to be designated as a heritage building and had not yet been so. I won't go too much into the architectural side of the argument to designate the building. I think the staff report does a very good job of that. What I'm more interested in sharing with you tonight is the importance of the buildings and the stories that the building holds. 48 Ontario Street North was originally built by the Bell Canada Company and is very integral to the introduction of phone service to Kitchener. Some of the numbers are in the staff report. It was a very important part of what at the time is a very significant technological shift, and this building was definitely played a huge role in that. After the Second World War, this building is where our veterans came for support, comradeship, fellowship. This is where they came to have that kind of relationship with each other. And I think that is something that needs to be recognized and remembered. In particular, of interest to me, and which is, has been inserted a bit into the report at Heritage Kitchener, is that this is the birthplace of the blues in Kitchener. It's not the birthplace of the blues, but in Kitchener, this is where the blues started. This is where Glenn Smith was able to hold concerts on an as-needed basis. It was close to parking, close to transportation, etc. That was able to give him the base that he needed to start the Hoodoo Lounge on weekends at the ill-fated Mayfair Hotel. He was able to then open up the legendary Pop the Gator, which brought Mel Brown to town. Mel Brown and the audience base is what organically led to the development of the Blues Festival that is so important to Kitchener today. This building is important because of that. I have been here at Council on a number of occasions where owners have been concerned about designation affecting the development potential of a building or the value of a building. Kitchener City Council needs to be a good steward of this building as its owner. It needs to show leadership that designation does not harm development potential or the value of property. In fact, from what I understand, it enhances it. So I'm asking you today to make sure that you move ahead and move the designation process forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howe. Councillor Ioannidis, I have a question to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Urbanovic. I just wanted to thank James for coming in. I know you've been a huge advocate for this building, and And I totally agree with you. And as Mr. Hook had mentioned earlier, is there a standard for ourselves over other residents? And I agree wholeheartedly, and I think we should be designating this property.
Great.
Councillor Netsky.
I have the heritage recommendation here regarding this property, unless there's other delegations.
There are other delegations, so
Okay,
I'll
so we
come to
can
you
wait.
at the end.
Okay.
Okay, those are all the questions we have. Thank you, Mr. Howe.
Okay.
Our next delegation is Marg Roll, representing the North Waterloo ACO. Welcome, Ms. Roll.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Marg Roll, and I am president of Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, the North Waterloo Region Branch, ACO for short. ACO is a provincial charity whose mission is to encourage the conservation and adaptive reuse of structures, districts, and landscapes of architectural, historic, and cultural significance. We are delighted that Heritage Kitchener is recommending designation of 48 Ontario Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and strongly encourage Council to accept their recommendation. By doing so, you will set a great example for other property owners. Designation recognizes the historical and cultural importance of this building. Its construction in 1926 as the handsome office of Bell Telephone, equipped with every modern device known to telephony, in quotes, to quote a 1940 Waterloo Historical Society article, has allowed Bell to further expand its list of subscribers and in turn advance the economies of Kitchener and Waterloo. This was followed by 55 years of it being the well-used home of the First and Second World War veterans who formed Branch 50, the Royal Canadian Legion, as well as a venue for a wide range of social and cultural events. Everything from fundraising dances to fashion shows to blues concerts. As the designation report notes, the classical revival style building has attractive decorative architectural features executed in brownstone. It's solidly built and has a great future ahead of it. At least it could have a great future. As we have seen with many other buildings, other heritage buildings, it's important that these buildings are not left vacant. Empty buildings have a history of falling victim to demolition by neglect. No matter how diligently city operations staff may monitor, there's no replacement for having people in a building keeping a constant eye on how it's performing. We are happy that 48 Ontario Street North has been included in the list of possible sites for a creative arts hub. But as Doors Open visitors on September 17th commented, that is just one of many possible uses for the building. We encourage the city and you, as our elected representatives, to ensure this building comes back to life. It deserves it, and we deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in this evening. We have some questions for you. Councillor Singh.
Sorry, I'll key back again. I have a question of staff.
Oh, okay. There aren't any questions, and thank you very much for coming in. We had one other delegation this evening, Mr. Dan Graham, but he doesn't look to be in the audience today. So we'll move to questions of staff. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. So, question to this building. There's still a process that's underway in assessing if it is suitable for a arts hub, as well as a question from the community to see if it should be kept under public ownership or available for disposition. That's one question, where that process is at. Second question would be to staff as to the current state of the building. One of the last delegation referenced that the building is in good structural condition, and I just want to get some more information from staff on its current condition.
Who wants to tackle that? Mr. Regier?
I can talk about the process of evaluating the building as a possible location for the Arts Hub, and I'd maybe ask my other colleagues here to talk about the building condition. As you know, we've been engaged in an extensive conversation with the community about this, about the concept of the Creative Industries Hub, and that discussion is proceeding well. Council had asked us to come back with a report before the end of the year, and that's what we intend to do. I think the report is due, is expected to be ready to bring to Council in early December.
And Mr. Reedman.
Through the Mayor, in terms of structural condition, the building is inspected regularly and it is found to be in good repair. There is plans to bring a costing program along with the report for different options for the building in December.
Councillor Singh, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up on that. Glad to hear that the building is in good structural condition. So there is a costing that's coming out. So am I to assume that the number would be quite minimal then if the building is in fact in good order? Can I get some confidence?
Through the Mayor, it depends on the use of the building, and those numbers are being worked on in parallel to the assessment that's going on.
So when would that be available then?
Through the Mayor in December, along with the report.
Based on usage. Okay, all right. So, and we have no information before that?
Through the Mayor, we understand the costs aren't minimal because there is mechanical and a number of factors. There's AODA requirements associated with it as well, depending on the use. So the cost isn't minimal.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Vervanovic. Question of staff was just brought up about AODA compliance, and in my tours of the building, it has come up that it would need an elevator to become AODA compliant. Is this possible, working together with Heritage, that we could add the elevator and still maintain the heritage integrity of the building?
Through the Mayor, that is our understanding, that an elevator could be accommodated and maintain the heritage components of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions. So Councillor Yunetsky can ask you to key in to bring forward the recommendation. Councillor Yunetsky.
Yes, thank you. Your Heritage Kitchener Committee recommends as follows. We have one recommendation that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property known as 48 Ontario Street North as being of cultural heritage value or interest.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for that? Councillor Gazzola? Okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
Can I have a recorded vote, please?
Sure. Any comments? Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Vervanovic. I agree with Councillor Ioannidis that this is a building that we own, and we need to be good guardians of the building, and it's difficult to ask private property owners to uphold heritage standards if we're not prepared to do it ourselves. So I think this is an opportunity for us to maintain the heritage integrity of the building and have it used, hopefully, for something that is outstanding for our city.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, but I've struggled with this, especially because, again, through my questions, I was trying to get some more information. We're still underway on review on what the right usage of this building could be, and obviously the condition of it and the cost to bring it to appropriate usage. At the same time, I recognize the unique character of what this place is and what it has had as an impact to our history, and what as a placemaking, that it's been able to provide to our residents. The struggle has been obviously the cost related. It's difficult to see exactly what and how impactful it will be, especially having heard the earlier delegation that brought forward their concerns as to how the direction of sustainability. And I think we have to recognize that is a factor. There are some things we can afford and some things we can't. But I think at the same time, this may be a very educational exercise where we walk the talk, by designating something that we do recognize is an important part of our history, and then realizing really what it costs to maintain that cost of history. And if it's going to be extensive, we need to realize that that same cost applies to our other citizens whose buildings and properties are designated as well. So I think it may be a very good educational process. So based on that, I will be supporting it.
Sorry, Councillor Netsky.
Yes, just as a follow-up on the various comments, and the Heritage Committee did consider this particular property back in their last meeting earlier this month, and highly recommended it being designated for all the various factors that were identified. And in the staff report prepared by the planning people, it's all outlined in all the details here, and I'm not going to repeat them here. However, I just also want to add that Mr. James Howe did appear also at Heritage Committee to ask for a slight change in wording of the portions required dealing with the birthplace, or really the recognition of the blues startup in that particular building. And we had tweaked the wording to satisfy him at that meeting to have that as part of the designation. It's not part of this particular recommendation, but there's a specific report that, a specific portion of it that recognizes that. So, and there are other delegations that also spoke at the Heritage Committee that supported the recommendation for this designation as well. So, it's moving forward, and we're happy to bring this forward for council consideration this evening.
Okay, still several speakers. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. I'm glad to see that this is here. It's obvious through the consultation process and that there's a significant amount of public interest in it with regards to this property. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that some of my other members had mentioned about that we need to walk the talk, but I think regardless of whatever happens, whatever investment we do put in this property, it will pay off if we ever end up doing to dispose of the property to the private sector. So, I mean, I think if we just keep it in the current state, it's just going to just remain in a lower property value. But if we bring it up to today's standards and make it accessible and usable, it'll only raise the value of the property, in which case if we do sell it.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. I just want to add my 2 cents worth that as the ward councillor that represents the area where 48 Ontario sits, I concur that we have an opportunity here that regardless of the future use of the building, it is important for us to lead by example and designate this property as a heritage property and demonstrate that we are, in fact, a council that does value heritage buildings. I am very glad to hear from the delegations tonight their interest in the building as well, and I look forward to seeing the process move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, very simply, I would say that we cannot put a price on preservation of historic buildings. We have a council responsibility to protect these buildings, and I only wish that the city and former councils had displayed more of that responsibility as we lost a lot of our heritage buildings. To me, we can't afford to lose any more buildings, and I think we should do everything possible to designate and protect this building.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm going to support the heritage designation. I certainly think that the case has been made. It's still kind of strange to think about when this building opened as Bell Telephone. It was probably at that point the highest tech building in the city. And now, yes. I do want to be clear on one point, though. I think we said it before when we were talking about the future of this building, in that I think it's important that we designate it, but I want to be 100% clear this doesn't necessarily mean the City of Kitchener needs to retain ownership. I think that there's a very big question mark on that at the moment, and we need to see the information that comes back before we deal with it. But I think it's important that we do designate it first, because that passes the very clear message on to, if we do decide to sell it off to the private sector, it passes on a very clear message, there's no ambiguity, that this is a building that we find important and it needs to be preserved.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything. I sit on Heritage, and I've supported the concept of designating this building for a long time. I'm pleased to see that it appears almost everyone on council are seeing the light and will be supporting this. Thank you.
And that looks like all of the comments. I too will be supporting this this evening in light of our ownership of the building, and a recorded vote has been called. So it's been moved and seconded. And it's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you all for coming in for this item this evening. We'll now move to the tenders. And Ms. Palmer's here to answer questions. Are there, first of all, does somebody want to move the tenders? Moved by Councillor Fernandez, seconded by Councillor Schneider. Thank you. Any questions on the sand salt spreader body? Is that your question, Councillor Gazzola? Okay, go ahead.
No, I see there is only one. There's only one bidder, and I'm just surprised at that. And I wonder sometimes if we're making the specs, we're molding the specs to suit ourselves with a lot of different reasons, and therefore we're not getting more people bidding on it. It's pretty hard when you only have one bid to realize whether you're getting a good deal or not. My question deals are the specs too rigid?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we competitively bid this 2 years ago, we did have multiple bids. However, the other bid that was received was disqualified as it did not meet the spec. When we reviewed the spec, these EPOC units are consistent with what we have in our fleet and allow us to enable the GPS to be connected to it, which enables our mandatory reporting around salt usage.
And there's only one bidder in our city, province, region?
Correct.
I guess I'll have to get into that business. Thank you.
Okay, that appears to be the only question there. Next is the disposal of excess material, Battler Yard. Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, I have expressed concern in the past that it's almost a two-step process. What will happen when this Battler Yard becomes the snow disposal site? Are we going to have to look for a new site to store this material and then have it moved again at an extra cost?
Ms. Fletcher, or I see both of you have looped in. So, okay. Mr. Reedman then.
Through the mayor, this is actually a property just north of the Battler Snow Storage Disposal, so it's actually property that we own. It's just north of the actual snow storage disposal site.
But it's still using the same access point.
This is part of around the swim pond that's just north of that facility. So my understanding is this area would remain for that use as part of the cleaning of the ponds.
Okay. Just a comment. I really wish we could find a better opportunity for doing something with this material. My thought was, why are we not using it at the snow disposal site? Because it's not toxic. We could be using it to help build that berm around the snow disposal site, which will help be a noise abatement for the residents who are living immediately south of the snow disposal site.
Through the mayor, it's not toxic material, but it doesn't meet the Table 2 standards for clean fill, so it still needs to go to a proper disposal site.
But we are using some material from that site to build that berm. So some of the we've been digging and removing materials out of that site where we had aggregates.
That's correct. Not the sediment that we've removed from the pond. So
No,
that's maintained separately, and it's tested, and then it's taken to the appropriate facility that it's required to go to based on legislation.
Okay, maybe this is a conversation we need to have offline then. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Gazzola.
You know, my questions were around the same. I thought we used to sell this material, but now, was all the material that was there, is it all toxic? Is it all contaminated? Can it be used for anything?
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the mayor, I do understand council's confusion. And what I can assure council is our new director of roads and traffic is taking on the task of looking at aggregate and materials management comprehensively. We have 4 divisions that move material and utilize aggregates, so we will be coming back to council with a comprehensive report and an update.
Do we have to move that now?
We have to move
Can it sit there until we have some kind of answers? We're dealing with $200,000 here. If we can
through
down
the mayor,
road save it.
Through the mayor, I would recommend approval of this particular tender. This is a legislated requirement to dispose of this material properly. We did hold on a tender that was brought forward to council about 4 weeks ago, with the idea that we would bring forward a more comprehensive report to council. But this particular tender needs to move forward.
Ms. Palmer, you wanted to add something? Or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to refer council to the INS report 16-013 that's referred to in this report around the excess soils, and that was a report that was brought forward to council, or committee rather, in regards to the cost differential between doing it this way and doing it in an alternative method.
Okay, I'm going to, just one follow-up question, as there aren't any others. I guess I'm just, like, the whole question of Battler Yards, and I think staff certainly should be aware of this, I mean, continues to be a big question mark for me. I mean, I think as a council, we referred the item back to staff a few weeks ago, as Ms. Fletcher pointed out. I'm just trying to understand why all these pieces are coming to us piecemeal, and we're not looking at a comprehensive report and all of the information together, so we're making an educated decision around this stuff. What did we do with this before? In the past? Who's tackling this? It's Mr. Wilmer, being the most senior person, will let you start.
I think I'm the oldest person, maybe, so I'll give you the historical perspectives. As council may recall, in the early days when we were talking about forming a stormwater utility, part of the problem was we had advanced to the point of creating stormwater quality control ponds in the 1990s, but we hadn't been maintaining them. They were starting to fill up with sediment and material that was not entirely clean material, but we hadn't started dredging them yet. So it's only recently that we've begun a program of maintaining our storm ponds and cleaning them out so that our water courses and our groundwater systems are protected. They're functioning as they should. What that means is we're intercepting contaminants and we need to dispose of them appropriately. But this is a new level of service for us.
So this is the first time we've had to deal with this type of...
I'm not sure this is exactly the first time, but I don't think we've got a long history of it.
Okay, Councillor Fernandez is saying it's the second time. I'm not sure.
Well, they're saying the price is down 10%, so we've done it before. We did it last year, but the same questions were here.
So it is, but it is stuff that we absolutely cannot process on our own. Mr. Reedman, you're looking to add something, as is Ms. Palmer?
And through the mayor, in addition to the other comments, the report that Ms. Palmer referred to, which came to committee in February, previous years we looked at removal and direct disposal, and that was costing in the order of about $220 per ton. So we did a pilot study to determine, what the most cost-effective way to handle this material was, and it was found that removing it, allowing it to dry to remove the water weight from the disposal, brought it down to about $88 a ton, and I understand this contract is at $82 a ton, so it's actually $6 cheaper a ton than our pilot had projected.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Palmer, you want to add something or no? No, okay. Okay, so we'll move on then to the third tender on here, utility meter reading services. Councillor Gazzola.
Can someone tell me the Hydro do not read their meters, right? Is that right? Who's on the Hydro board?
Mr. Chapman?
Hydro has remote technology, so it's automated meter reading.
Okay, that's where I'm going. There was one time we were looking at this remote reading, and this whole Internet of Things that I'm schooled on by other councillors all the time. Where do we sit on this? Here's a prime example of it. Have we looked at it? Are we continuing to look at it? Where do we stand on it? And I'm especially concerned here because we're looking at it says a 20% increase from the previous bid. There are two questions. The main one is, where do we stand on getting this automated the way it should be?
So I'll respond in two parts. First of all, I'd note that increase is with respect to 2012 tender, and so the annualized inflation is much lower than 20%. You are correct. We have piloted automated meters for water and for gas to this point with unsatisfactory results, and on that basis have not been prepared to move ahead with a full implementation. But you're also correct that Council has set aside money as we implement the narrowband network through the LED streetlights to pilot these devices, and so we expect as the technology has matured, that will form part of our pilot, and we're hopeful that we can start a program to replace these meters over time with automated meters.
So this is the last time we'll be approving this?
It depends. One scenario would be that if we get comfort around the new technology, all new meters and all replacement meters will be on the new technology, but we'll continue to have these meters in inventory until they're retired from service. So I expect over time it will decline, but it may be many years before it's fully phased out.
I think it's an interesting one, and Councillor Gazzola will probably remember this because I think it was a time when, I can't remember if it was him or Mr. Denouden and myself and Ed Kovacs, who used to, many, many years ago, be head of Kitchener Utilities, traveled down to Buffalo to look at automated meter reading, and it was probably at least 15 years ago, if not. Well, no, because I wasn't around then. 22. Can you turn your mic on? Sorry.
This day for gas, which is the tougher of the two, I think. Well, I don't know to measure. I'm surprised that we haven't moved ahead on this because it's a substantial expenditure that technology should be looking after it.
So through the chair, all I would offer is that the expenditure to replace the network would be in the tens of millions of dollars, and if we get it wrong, that would be a huge expense to the taxpayer. So we need to be careful in terms of that investment. The other point I would make is that we read 2 meters, whereas most utilities read 1, and so the business case is not as strong for us because for every residence we send the reader out to, they're reading 2, and so the cost per meter is lower. So I assure you we're fully committed. We know this is the direction we'll be going, but we need to do it prudently.
Okay, Ms. Palmer, did you want to add something, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just one small note that the pricing received within this tender is actually consistent with the pricing we received in the 2007 tender, the contract before the prior one.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to Kitchener Utilities rental water heater program. No questions. Metzloff Drive reconstruction. Any questions? Councillor Fernandez.
Not so much of a question, Mr. Mayor, but we've had, the total budget for this tender is 1,001,2. I would really strongly hope that we do not have to see an additional request for more money, that we really hold the feet to the fire for this particular consultant who we've awarded tenders to before. I think that's really critically important. It does bother me when we have to add an extended purchase order, I believe is the wording that we would be using. So let's hope we can keep these guys within that budget line.
Okay, thank you. So the tenders have been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on. Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Moving on then to the reports of the committees, and Councillor Davey, I believe you're up first.
Thank you. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Marsh that the 6 items from Finance and Corporate Services Committee be adopted.
I would like to deal with item number 1 separately.
Okay.
And 5 has to be dealt with separately anyhow.
Okay. Councillor Yanetsky, are you on the same item?
In a way, yes. With item number 1, I'd like to have the 4th paragraph dealt with separately.
Okay. Okay, so I'll go back to you, Councillor Gazzola.
Well, I have a number of questions that I'm concerned about. I had asked and had hoped that we would look at some different scenarios, and I'm told by staff that they've looked at many different scenarios, but those haven't been shared by council. I'm concerned with 2 components, 2 of the 3 components, and they're the 2 components that have no impact on our profitability picture. They're components that are straight pass-throughs. And the first one deals with the price, the supply price. We have been paying over the market value for so long that when you're coming forward, staff are recommending and the committee approved a decrease from 10.5 cents to 9.5 cents. And I would like to see that go down to 8.5 cents. Or I would at least like to have seen some calculations of moving it down to 8.5 cents. And when we dealt with this at committee 3 weeks ago, I didn't have the opportunity at that point to see the financial statements for the gas operation for whatever period of time. We now have financial statements up to the end of August. And we had expected to have supply costs go to the point where they would drain a $7 million surplus that we had set aside, and it only changed by, I think, $336,000. My point is that I believe that we can go to an 8.5 rate on the supply without affecting anything. The other component is the transportation. We're increasing the transportation component by 25%. I would prefer to see us, instead of going to a 5% to a 5-cent rate, to go from 4 to 4.5 instead of 4 to 5. And that would, looking at that, even with that, going with a 12.5% increase, that would have brought in during the past year, if I look at our statements, an additional 700,000, and we have our surplus impact is only in the neighborhood of 200,000. We don't need to go up unless someone can show me why we have to have a 25% increase. The whole purpose of this is that without affecting our profitability, one had nothing to do with our profitability, nothing to do with any other efficiencies or changes. But if we were to go to a 8.5 rate increase on supply and 4.5% on transportation, instead of our customers being hit by a 10% impact as a result of the additional cap and trade, the impact would be closer to 5.5%. So that's all I asked for when we dealt with this at committee 3 weeks ago. Let's look at some different alternatives. And it doesn't, to me, we're able to do that without impacting anything. We have been paying, our customers have been paying really, 50-60% higher than the spot price on the supply side of it over the last several years. And I think they deserve a break. And that has no impact, no skin off our back, because we have the money there. So I'm actually was going to move a recommendation of 8.5 and 4.5, but then everybody's going to say, well, it's, we can't do that or that. We need to look at it. I'd be fine with deferring this topic until we do have a better look at it. End of story.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. So I guess a couple questions. Question of staff. Do you have an idea offhand if this 8.5 and 4.5 was approved, what it would mean to our gas utility?
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the chair, I don't have the numbers directly at hand. What I can assure council is we have a commodity risk committee. It includes industry experts, industry consultants, utilities staff, and financial planning staff. There's extensive analysis that goes on. We meet regularly. We project to the end of next year. And we've taken the current surplus into account. So as part of the rate setting for next year, any surplus that is realized right now is taken into account as part of that analysis. The proposed rates that we have before you position the utility at the minimum end of the range for a rate stabilization reserve. All I can say is there's considerable financial risk related to the utility, related to weather and cost variability. And so the rates that we've put before you, we think are they're fair. They've taken into account any surplus, and they give us a bit of a cushion to deal with any volatility.
And to be clear, to the viewing public as well, supposing that it is an error and we do end up collecting additional revenue, what happens to that additional revenue?
Through the chair, the Kitchener Utilities, any what you would say is revenue is either turned back into the community through a dividend, or it is considered for rate setting for the following year.
And we have seen several times in the past when we did overcharge in previous years and we refunded that money through rate reductions in subsequent years.
That is correct.
Okay. My next question, as I believe clause number 4 was also pulled out, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, it was.
Okay. What are the implications if council were to, and this might be a question for Mr. Chapman because I'm curious about the financial impact, what would be the consequences of council voting against the province's cap and trade, which they've legislated us to adopt?
Chapman.
It's a really interesting question. What I can say at this point is it would not be good for KU. I think at our peril would we flaunt provincial legislation that governs our rate setting. So certainly we would come under the attention of the OEB if we were not implementing it. What that would mean for us, I can't say at this point, but the province would not allow us to not implement the standard.
Do you recall the approximate amount that we need to set aside and collect for the provinces on an annual basis for the cap and trade program in total?
The total revenue is about, I would say on average, $11 million per year.
$11 million per year. And my understanding is it runs over 4 years. So supposing that we even got away with voting against it, at the end of the 4-year term, ratepayers would be on the hook for $44 million. Is that an accurate understanding?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So I just want to be 100% clear on this portion, Mr. Mayor, if you'll forgive the comment. Voting against this, again, I don't think anyone is content with how the province has implemented the cap and trade with respect to our gas utilities. We've talked about it several times in the past. What deeply concerns me is the idea that a member of council would vote against paying for something that we have no recourse. We must pay for it. It's like choosing not to pay your taxes. How does that work out for you in the end? The reality is we vote against this in 4 years' time. At best, we're going to have a $44 million hit that we have to somehow come up with that amount of money. So as I've said in the past, and I'll say it again, if you vote against this, it's completely and utterly irresponsible.
Councillor Gazal, I'll come back to you in a moment. Okay, I'll come back to you. Just hang on, you're in the queue. Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, I would really like to take into consideration Councillor Gazola's suggestion of the 1 more cent reduction on the supply component. I think that in light of the whole cap and trade situation, it will send the message to our ratepayers that we do care about the fact that they are going to be kicking up an extra amount of money, even though it flows right through us and into the province. It's only 1 cent per cubic meter. We may not have as much in the reserve as we do right now, but I still think that we are going to have a reserve, and it would be at least a good opportunity to support our ratepayers. Mr. Chapman, this may be a bit premature. Would you have an understanding of what that 1 cent additional reduction would mean?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, by my quick math, as you know, we maintain minimum reserve balances of 10% of annual revenue. The proposals that Councillor Gazzola had put forward are essentially 10% of revenue. And so by my back-of-the-envelope math, that recommendation would essentially wipe out the stabilization reserves in supply and transportation. And I would point out that this year we had a $5 million swing in our actual in supply, and that just highlights the volatility that we have in that program and the need for reserve balances.
So, just so I'm very clear, that if we went from the 10 cents per cubic meter down to 8.5, at the 10.5 to 8.5, the $4 million that we have in reserve would be completely wiped out.
As Ms. Fletcher indicated, the proposals in front of you essentially maintain minimum reserve balances in each of the areas of the utility. And what amounts to about a 10% reduction in both supply and transportation would essentially wipe out those reserve balances, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
So, I want to reiterate this as well. If we don't implement the program, and we do lower our fees, in essence, we are funding a provincial program for the residents.
Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Gazzola, you will have the floor in a moment, and you can speak. The question's being asked of staff. Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, all I would say is it depends on how it's positioned.
Okay, but any reduction is we're basically we're funding a provincial program on behalf of our residents.
If the argument is that this new charge has been implemented and as a result we need to reduce our rates, then ostensibly that is subsidizing it, yes. If they're disconnected, then no. They are separate considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Okay, let me start off. I've not said a thing about cap and trade. I don't like cap and trade. I'm not making any changes to it. Okay, well, you're okay.
Councillor Davey, Councillor Gazzola has the floor now.
So cap and trade is what it is. We have no choice. We have to pay it. We will pay it. Our customers pay it. No arguments. I'm arguing about two other components that have no bearing on our reserves other than the reserves we have set aside for supply and transportation. It doesn't affect our profitability. It doesn't affect our earnings and our dividends that we're making from our gas. Right now, we start the year with a $9 million surplus in supply. We had budgeted to wipe that down by $5 million, but as of August 31st, we're only wiping it down by $336,000. So we're not wiping out that $9 million reserve. We've got lots of reserve there to put a favorable supply price to our customers. And so I've got nothing to do with profitability, nothing to do with arguing with cap and trade. There are two flow-through components that I'm saying we should be able to adjust them, and as a result of adjusting them, the bottom line to our customers will be a substantial lower increase. And at the same time, we're fulfilling all our commitment for cap and trade. We're not butting out of that. We're not arguing with that. We're going along with it.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. So, question to staff just about this proposal. If we decrease the amount in our reserve, or if we eliminate some of the reserves associated with this program, I'm wondering, would that potentially add incentive to staff to look towards finding creative ways to get our carbon offsets, our credits towards things like, things that are innovative that the government of Ontario will recognize for us to be able to trade in as a carbon offset. Could it be that maybe we will need to be more creative if we don't have those reserves?
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the Mayor, I would suggest at this point the details of the cap and trade program and the carbon credits and what will qualify and what will not qualify are not yet known. Mm-hmm. So to answer the question today, I wouldn't be able to answer that definitively.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so currently what's being proposed is that, that we would create the minimum amount in the reserves so that by the end of a 4-year period we can pay it off. So if we don't have to pay that $44 million or so until 2021. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chapman? Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think we're talking about two entirely different considerations.
Okay.
As Councillor Gazzola rightly pointed out, supply stands on its own. Mm-hmm. His proposal is to reduce the supply rate. The effect of that would be to wipe out the stabilization reserve for supply. Mm-hmm. That would leave us exposed to negative weather or volume volatility. What you're talking about is the carbon program. Mm-hmm. At this point in time, our projection only funds the cost of the credits that we need to purchase. You're right, in time we may be able to engage in offset projects, but I think our sense right now is that there is only risk to the negative in that program because we've assumed the auction floor price, and our expectation is that the cost of that program will only rise over time. So our hope would be that offsets and that sort of thing will reduce that negative impact, but we're still expecting that to become a more expensive program over time, not a cheaper program.
So then the implications of wiping out the reserve that is being proposed by Councillor Gazzola will have implications in 2017?
Correct. That reserve would essentially go down to a nil position. And I just want to make the point that when we sat here in budget last year, we were projecting a supply rate increase based on supply costs. We're recommending a supply rate decrease. The only reason for that is because the budget was off last year. We had weather that was not expected and prices that weren't expected. And so what should have been an increase is now a decrease because we have a surplus.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Davey. Oops, sorry, can you click again? There you go.
Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying, Councillor Gazzola, I wasn't speaking to you about the cap and trade. You did not pull out clause number 4. It was Councillor Yaneski. I was speaking directly to his removal of that to vote on separately. That's all I really wanted to say. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear as well that when we're talking about reducing rates here, the recommendation that was approved at committee is to not raise rates. We are not raising rates from where they were last year. The only component that is going up is the cap and trade, the provincial program, not the City of Kitchener, the Kitchener Utilities.
Okay, before I come to you for your amendment, Councillor Gazzola, Mr. Chapman, just to be clear on the supply side of things, so you're suggesting that if we go ahead with the proposed amendment, it would wipe out our reserve, and it would potentially create challenges for us if any of our assumptions don't come true. So, for example, there is talk of a new deal amongst OPEC on the oil side of things that could potentially impact the gas side of things as well. The Farmer's Almanac and others are saying this winter may be worse than we've had in recent years. That too could impact that. So all of that would, in the end, not only wipe out our reserves, but potentially result in an inordinate increase next year on our ratepayers. Mr. Chapman?
So we can point to many years where the opposite of what happened last year happened, and that is that we had a colder than anticipated winter, so volumes went up and the price went up because there was a supply issue in the market. And so this year, what we think will be a $5 million net surplus at the end of the year could equally be a $5 million net deficit, which is why we would recommend maintaining 10% of annual revenue as a reserve balance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola, you'd like to bring forward an amendment?
Yes. I want to point out, though, that as of September, our spot prices were around 8.3 cents a cubic meter, and we're charging 10.5 cents. So if that's the case, our reserves, our supply reserve, is going to be increasing. And our statements clearly indicate that, because at the end of 6-8 months, we had budgeted, and I don't know if this is the budget for the year, if this is a prorated budget. Is it a prorated budget? So we had budgeted to draw upon that reserve by $5 million, and we're only drawing upon it by $336,000. So this talk that it's going to wipe out this whole $9 million reserve, I don't buy that. And I don't...
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, I'm asking if you can, I'm not asking you to argue your position, I'm asking you to tell us what your amendment is. And because it's only
argue my position in order to influence council to change their mind. And I don't know if that's the right answer, 8.5 cents and 4.5 on transportation. I asked 3 weeks ago that we look at some different scenarios. I looked at them, and from my rough mathematics, and I don't have all the facts, I was able to calculate that we can do all of that, not wipe out our reserves, have no impact on our profitability, fully fulfill all the requirements of cap and trade, and give our customers a little bit of a break.
Okay, so are you moving an amendment?
I will move an amendment. I will, in order to get it on the floor. I would like to move a deferral. defer.
Okay, so I'll take a motion for deferral. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Yanetsky. All those in favor of the deferral? Okay.
Yes, I'd like to have staff look at,
Until which date?
I don't know what the timing for the requirement, how quickly we need to make a decision on, because we're looking at rates to be implemented with consumption in January, is that right? Yeah, so when do we have to make that change?
Next committee day. So December 7th. That's what you're moving?
That's what I'm moving, yes.
I think it's December 7th. Is that?
It's actually...
Sorry, November 7th.
All right, that's what I'll move.
Sorry, I skipped a month.
I was going to take December the 7th if you didn't.
Want to get to Christmas sooner. Okay.
So we're voting for a deferral.
Right, to November 7th. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion doesn't carry.
Okay, in that case, I will not make any amendments. Would be wasting our time here. I do ask that you vote on each of the components, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separately, with a recorded vote.
Okay, that's fine.
I'd like to ask a question of staff, if I could.
Go ahead.
It's on the last motion where I asked that a note be placed on the bills. I was hoping that we would see an example of where that tonight. We're not. I wanted that notice to be put on the face of the bill and referred to and reference to the delivery charge component. That's not it's not going contrary to anybody. It's just making it clearer for our customers. Now I would have hoped to have seen that tonight, but I don't see it here.
You were looking for the actual wording?
Yes.
Well, I think, Councillor Gazzola, in fairness, I don't think it's, I mean, the staff can respond, but I don't think it's, we don't get into the micromanaging of specific communication wording. That's something that staff do. Mr. Chapman?
Through the mayor, so we confirmed by email that we can add the messaging to the bill. We understood that the committee's direction was to follow this intent, but the committee didn't request to see the actual wording. If we're so directed, we'll provide it, but we understand council's intent and we'll make sure the wording reflects that.
Okay, thank you. So we've been asked to deal with I'll deal with the balance of finance and corporate services first. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we'll go paragraph 1. A recorded vote's been called in each paragraph. Paragraph 1 of 1. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Paragraph 2. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Paragraph 3. There's a public meeting going on downstairs if people are wondering. That's carried unanimously. Paragraph 4. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And paragraph 5. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to planning and strategic initiatives. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The items outlined as recommendations from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee have been seconded or moved and seconded by Councillor Etherington. Oh, sorry, no, Ioannidis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I want to deal with item number 2 separately.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez. Number 4 separately?
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, just the one clause, actually.
Okay.
Clause 5.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that. Councillor Gazzola, go ahead with item number 2. Do you have some comments or just vote
I'll
separately?
make a comment. I will not be, I'm asking for a recorded vote. I will not be supporting what's before us. I had asked that before we approve a strategy, we keep talking about preparing a business case after the strategy has been approved. I think that's the backward way of doing it, and so I didn't support it at committee. I also asked to look at the detail of the research or public engagement we did, and I spent a day. Staff were very kind to provide complete detail on the public engagement. I found it very sketchy, and I don't really see a great deal of the strategy coming from that, so I won't be supporting it, and as I said, I'd like a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you. We'll deal with it separately. Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the clauses related to the deferral of the support for the OMB motion. Yes, we have seen that the province has come out with their consultation paper and some public meetings scheduled, but I just felt that to see it being moved again, deferred to another future meeting, I would have loved to see in the City of Kitchener come out and at least strongly support the motion that was originally put forward by Aurora, especially after the summit and the strength on the number of municipalities that attended and the recommendations that came out of that particular summit. So I'm going to ask for that. Just, I suppose, yes, it is important for that whole item to come out and for that to be voted on separately.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Marsh.
I'd just like to comment on number 2.
Go ahead.
I think it's vital that we support the strategic plan regarding the Kitchener market. We can't create a business plan based on nothing. We have to have a strategy in place in order to then logically develop a business case. And so I think that based on the dialogue that we had at the committee meeting and based on the work done by staff, we have some terrific strategies to base the business case on, and I encourage all of council to vote for number 2.
Okay, thank you. No other comments, so I'll deal with 1 and 3 first. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 2, recorded vote has been called. Excuse me. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And number 4? We're voting on number 4? No, we're voting on number 4 in its present format. Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? And that too is carried. Okay, that gets us through planning and strategic initiatives. Heritage Kitchener, we have finished. Unfinished business. Any new business? Just 2 quick items. Not so much a regional council update, but just an update for council in terms of our ongoing advocacy work with the federal government. Big City Mayor's Caucus has had meetings with Minister Duclos on housing, as well as Ministers Sohi on infrastructure, Minister McKenna on environment and climate change, as well as Minister Morneau on finance. And certainly we've continued to articulate the main asks around infrastructure funding in each of those areas for municipalities, as well as some of the things that worked in phase 1 and some that didn't. I mean, one of the ones that certainly I've pointed out, because of our 2-tier structure here, we weren't able to apply for trail funding, as an example, out of the transportation fund this last time, because that was purely limited to municipalities that have transit systems. So in a single-tier municipality like Hamilton, Ottawa, or Toronto, that worked. In a 2-tier system like ours, that didn't work because all of the money went to the region. So while we didn't get shortchanged as a region, because certainly it made important investments in our transit infrastructure, the connectivity to it we weren't able to augment, and it's something that we're hoping to see corrected in phase 2, and we anticipate over the next number of months to get some updates. The second item of new business that I just wanted to bring up is some of you who were, I guess this would really only be, some were on staff, some were on council in 2005, and you might recall a certain bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young economic development individual who moved to the city of Kitchener from the Rock in eastern Canada, and that somebody was our Executive Director of Economic Development, Rod Regier. And this is Rod's final council meeting with us. We'll have an opportunity tomorrow afternoon to have a little bit of a farewell event for him. But he's only moving down the street over to the region. So it's not too far, and it's always great to keep good talent in the region. But I think during his time here, Rod has demonstrated a real commitment to not only this city but our broader community, He's done some great things, and I'll turn it over to Jeff in a moment to talk about some of them in his department in areas such as arts and culture and special events and the market and obviously the work that we've done in particularly most recently on our new economic development strategy, Make It Kitchener. And so, Rod, on behalf of council, I just wanted to publicly take this opportunity to thank you for your years of service over the last 11 years to the city of Kitchener. I think we're a better city for all of your leadership and guidance in economic development. You've left us with a good, solid department going forward. And the best part is we know that you're only a few short steps away if we need to call on you. And with that, I'll turn it over to our CAO, Jeff Wilmer, to make some comments as well.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Certainly those who've had the opportunity to work with Rod know that he's a true visionary, that he's a strategic thinker, and that he's passionate about city building. And it strikes me that a lot of times when people have those qualities, that they're passionate and visionary and strategic, they struggle with getting anybody else on board to share that vision. And that is certainly not the case with Rod. I think one of the great gifts that he's shared with this organization, and more importantly with our community, is that he has an uncanny ability to get other stakeholders and other collaborators on board to work together towards a shared vision. And we first saw this in a big way with KEDS 2011. But he and the whole team and all the collaborators around him certainly upped the bar considerably with Make It Kitchener, the strategy that Council approved earlier this year. So, Rod, we're definitely going to miss you, and I hate to see you leave our organization, but I take great comfort from knowing that your vision, your enthusiasm, and your real commitment to city building will now be shared at a region-wide scale. So thank you. I echo the Mayor's comments. Thank you on behalf of our whole community for what you've brought over the last 11 years.
Did you want to say anything here, or do you want to leave it till tomorrow? This is public record, so. Rod?
Well, I just want to thank you for 11 amazing years working with a fantastic city. I remember when I first learned about this opportunity, and I saw what Kitchener had put together as an economic development program back in 2004 and 2005, and I thought, wow, if any city had the capacity to make an enormous difference in economic development, this was going to be it, and it was very exciting to join the team at that time and help out with the project. Of course, we've had a fantastic team to work with, and amazing partners that have put their shoulder to the wheel as well. So I'm very excited about where Kitchener is right now and where we're going as a city, and I think there's an enormous opportunity still to be realized here. So thank you very much for your support over the last 10, 11 years.
Great. Thank you very much, Rod. Moving on then to questions and answers. And there not being any, we'll move on to first reading of the bylaws. It's been moved by Councillor Gazzola, seconded by Councillor Etherington, that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and that the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to the committee of the whole. I understand there are no late starters, so all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Yanetsky that Council resolve itself into committee of the whole. Councillor Yanetsky. Oops, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm requesting for a mover for the second reading of the bylaws. Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed? Approved. Item number 1, the tenders have already been all dealt with. Item number 2, the appointment to the Kitchener Power Corporation.
I'll move that.
Do you have a mover for that?
I'll move that.
Mayor Urbanovic moving that. Any discussion? Questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item number 3, the delegated authority for the Ontario Cap and Trade Program. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Fernandez moves that. Any discussion?
Oh, Councillor Marsh has a question on that? Yeah. Councillor Yanetsky, do you want to?
Yes, Councillor Marsh?
That's me. Thank you, Chair Yanetsky. Just a very minor nitpicky point, but in the wording of this motion, it's referring to the DCAO of Infrastructure Services, and I think we would just want to just change that wording to be the Interim Executive Director of Infrastructure Services so that it reflects the current staff.
Mr. Wilmer's looking to speak to that.
Through the chair, it's a good point, and I think we'd best generalize it to say the department head, because right now we have an executive director. In due course, we expect to have a deputy CAO. So I think if we generalize it now, we'll be good for all time.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Any further questions? For item number 3, all those in favor? Opposed? That's so moved. And the third item was just for information purposes dealing with the annual variance report.
Councillor Yanetsky, I think Councillor Fernandez wants to ask a question.
I didn't see your hand. Councillor Fernandez.
So you need to take a motion to
motion to deal with the item. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Yes, I did ask Mr. Chapman as to why we were seeing a variance report at council when often we see it at the finance committee, where we have a better opportunity to ask questions. But he assured me that we could ask questions tonight as well. And given that we're not too bad time-wise, I've got at least one question. My understanding from the report is the operating fund is that we're looking at a surplus of $715,000. Is that right? Okay. Is this the right opportunity to move some of that money into our tax stabilization fund, or is it there already?
Through the chair, no, now's not the time. This is a projection per policy. Whatever our annual final number is, that number automatically will move into the tax stabilization reserve fund.
Okay.
So wherever we end up at year end, that's what is transferred. At this point, we're projecting it will be $715,000.
Okay. The other question I have is on page 4-7, and it does actually relate to our questions around the Battler Yards, and it doesn't have a number line, so the best way I can reference is it's under operations, administration, and it shows a negative of $75,000. And the explanation is current and projected deficit due to the higher than budgeted, wrong one. Sorry, guys.
Under road maintenance.
Thank you. Under road maintenance, we're seeing a $100,000 negative deficit because the projected deficit due to aggregate revenue budgeted no longer sold. Is it correct for me to understand that what was being sold at Battler Yard, the aggregates that we were using, that we are now out of that business completely?
Yes, but not because we're locating a snow dump there. Yes, because there's no market for the product. So we've tried unsuccessfully to tender the sale of the recycled aggregate, and there is no market for it.
Okay, so there's no market for the aggregate that was there being stored. That's what I'm understanding. For some reason, you're coming on really echoey, so I'm just going to lean in a bit more. Is that what I'm understanding?
For the recycled product that we used to sell, yes, there is no longer a market for that product.
Okay, but we used to use some of that product ourselves. The recycled asphalt was often used in some of our trails to stabilize some of the trails. I'm a little bit concerned that, and you and I had a conversation or some email back about 1.5 years ago related to the cost-benefit analysis that was done by Ms. Houston related to the Battler Yards, where it said that this was a good opportunity for us to save money. Now we're no longer going to be doing that. So that $100,000 is going to be a hole in our budget. Is that right?
Ms. Fletcher. Councillor Yanetsky, Ms. Fletcher wants to respond.
Yes, Madam Fletcher.
Through the chair. Thank you. I think the questions and confusion for council came up, as I said, a number of weeks ago when we brought a tender forward. I have to admit, myself and the directors in operations are getting up to speed on what historically Battler Yards was seen to be and where we are today. As Mr. Chapman has indicated, it doesn't appear that recycled aggregate is the moneymaker that it was thought to be, but what I want to do is bring a comprehensive report back to council. It appears we have not closed that loop with council so that there's a full understanding of what aggregate material we're talking about, what we thought we were going to do with it, and what the reality is today.
Okay. Okay, and I appreciate that you are going to do that. I just wanted to flag this as one of my concerns on the variance of the report. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola also has questions. Councillor Yanetsky.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have 22 questions, but I'm not going to ask them. I will send them to staff, and I will copy all of council. I'm not going to ask any questions. I just do want to make one point. I've been trying for 15 years to get monthly financial statements, and I won't even waste my time asking for it because that won't happen. It does concern me when I look at the statements, and we're sitting now with a $2.1 million surplus, and that's going to dribble away to $715,000 by the end of the year. But we're not going to have another chance to look at this when we deal with budget next month. We're going to be dealing really in a vacuum, not knowing how a lot of our accounts have made out. So I just want to make that point in the hopes of someday, if I'm still alive, that we'll see monthly financial statements coming out of the corporation. Thank you.
Are you looking for a response from staff? No. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, seeing there's none, and since it was noted by the mayor and clerk that there's no further items as late starters, I ask that the mover for the committee to rise and report.
So moved.
Okay, moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Fernandez that the proceedings and recorded pecuniary interests and the conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held as date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes are hereby adopted and confirmed.
All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Gazzola, seconded by Councillor Etherington, that the bylaws listed on the agenda for third reading be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and numbered serially by the clerk. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And it's been moved by Councillor Schneider that we now adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Have a great evening, everybody.